while they're pushing it. If we don't get the youth involved in something that creates a really open space for imagination, you can't think of the next creative, technical, or scientific ideal. And I want to say, just from my personal perspective, backing up what Grace was saying, I am a total, I'm not a militant on many topics anymore as I get older, but I am a militant for life on the arts. And I will say that art is this is my personal definition. Feel free to use it, feel free to see why it makes sense. The arts are any and every creative expression that appeal to the senses. You know what your senses are, whether it's sight, smell, touch, etc., even all the way to your soul. So to omit the arts is really death, point blank. If you have no sensory, you are what? You dead. So that's my perspective. But to answer the question, I'll turn it over to my panel. I'll start with Hannibal on the phone. I'm basically asking again, with STEAM and STEM becoming more popular, how do you feel about the arts involvement in that? Are we, who are creators, being taken advantage of, or is it lucrative? Because there's a lot of money in this, a lot of good grants and things are being pushed towards certain artists, etc. So there's benefits to it, but I'm saying, is it just another example of being used for the sake of science trumping us, and then the arts get cut again?
Well, I'll say two things. Well, there's two ways to look at it. Because the first thing when you start discussing this became in my mind was a quote from the rapper Razzcast, who said, "The diameter of your knowledge is the circumference of your activity." So with that in mind, the first thing that I thought was that I've never seen, because, and not just in my own personal experience, but in terms of research, I've never seen any shortage of black people who had a desire to do something artistic, sing, create, because there is a very creative, at least in the United States, I've seen it as well in Nigeria and in Cameroon and in some other places, but there is a very strong drive to make something, to express. Some of this has to do with the constant suppression of our expression on a global scale in terms of white world supremacy, but some of it has to do with just, the desire to want to make something. And all people have that. On the other hand, there is a distinctive shortage of STEM-based education and people who practice that in the workplace. So what has to be made to make those things work together is a kind of business case. The reasons why arts funding is under attack is because many conservative elements are seeing it as a non-profit venture. People pouring money into something that doesn't have a cultural or, better yet, a societal reward in terms of financial remuneration. However, when you point to the Avengers, when you point to Dark Knight, the Rises, or whichever movie made all the money, and when you point to how much of the current economy is funded by content, by entertainment, by this sort of thing, and that stuff can't be made by machines, despite the fact that they're really trying to figure that out. That sort of thing becomes a relevant thing that you can build into that sort of business case. That you cannot create somebody who, like when Motorola came up with the flip phone, they talked about, I remember seeing Star Trek and thinking, why don't I have that? So they grew up as engineers, as math-oriented people, and said, I've got to figure this out. The same sorts of things can happen with the sort of education we're talking about, the innovation. I saw a story about a brother in Africa who came up with a motion-based battery charger, because there's a problem with a lot of digital devices on the continent that they can't stay charged based on this, outlets or batteries expensive. But if you do something motion-based, everybody's got to move. And if your clothes are charging your stuff, that can help things
talk a little bit about that from a unique perspective, because I know that STEM, the purpose of STEM is really so that we can compete on a global scale, as Tony mentioned. And countries like China and India are kind of outpacing us when it comes to science and math and engineering. I actually danced with a group called the Atlanta Chinese Dance Company for about 7 years, and I did classical and folk dance. And most of my contemporaries who danced with me were scientists at Georgia Tech. So, and I was the only African American in that particular dance company. But they told me that dance was just as an example of art, it was a way for them to understand spatial relationships. It was a way for them to use math actively and physically and experientially. So when we're even engaging with our children, sometimes we kind of discount certain aspects of our own culture. We might even say, why are you dancing so much? Sit down and learn your math lesson. On the flip side, in the Chinese community, it's like, dance more so you can learn your math lesson. So I just wanted to bring up that point about STEM.
Anybody else?
I think in American culture and in a lot of Western culture, a lot of ways, there's this false dichotomy of math versus art, so-called left brain versus right brain. When those things, it's all part of a spectrum of human cognitive activity. I mean, all of it has to be encouraged enthusiastically on the same level in order to have like a functioning society. Like in Japan, they have something that's like living cultural icons. Like if there's some type of cultural craft and there's one last master that knows that craft, that person becomes protected by the state. They go around, all around Japan, and they show people this thing that they do, and they explain it why it's important to your culture. I mean, we need that. America needs that. And then going back to the false dichotomy, when you put that in the context of the African American experience, it becomes amplified because we have to concentrate so much on, job, money, trying to fit in with society in whatever way. So a lot of that stuff gets discounted when all of it is important.
Well, I think the art STEAM should have been a long time ago. Like, it should have never been STEM. It should have been STEAM a long time ago when it first initiated. So, and it's like, it makes me go back to when I was a little kid and we used to jump rope and we were counting and we were doing math and science and art have always been incorporated together. So, I mean, this isn't new. This isn't something that was just started. I mean, it's always been. So, I think it's actually a good idea that it's, now nationally publicized. So, it's just now a matter of us sticking with it and a matter of, making sure that we hold it as whoever runs it accountable so that it also has its due justice as well.
Unfortunately, I've triple booked myself, so I need to get out of here. I just want to add stuff, though, as far as, the left side of the brain versus the right side of the brain. We need to make learning fun again. Now, we go old school here. Who remembers Schoolhouse Rock? All right, Schoolhouse Rock had us all knowing our multiplication tables. We all knew what a verb was. I couldn't wait to use a verb, So it's a perfect example of using art with education. And that's the thing that I think this country is missing out on. Like I said, you can look at the little kid and stuff, running around and stuff, with his diaper hanging off, and he's like, trying to, do the latest lyrics from a rap song, but the kid don't know his ABCs. You have to make education fun. And I think if you put education with the sciences, art with the sciences, it'll help improve this country.
Thank you, Tony.